Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show where we grab a stack of sources, really get into complex topics, and pull out the most important bits of knowledge to help you get genuinely well-informed and fast.
Glad to be diving in.
Today we're tackling a truly monumental figure. His story is huge, but also incredibly complex. We're talking about Toussaint Louverture.
Right. And this isn't just about, listing dates and events. We're exploring leadership itself, liberty, revolution, the whole messy picture.
Exactly, and how we actually remember leaders, it's rarely just black and white, good or bad, is it?
Not at all. It's about getting to grips with their full humanity, contradictions and all. You've probably thought about this yourself, maybe thinking back to that what makes a good leader
Yeah.
exercise Mr. A had you do.
Oh, yeah, where you had to pick qualities: political skill, toughness, morality, honesty.
Eloquence, compassion, even humor. And the tricky part was always choosing just two as very important. That choice, it really makes you think about what matters most, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And it makes you realize how even famous figures like, say, American presidents Lincoln, FDR, Washington, Jefferson, their legacies are always up for debate,
Right.
always being reevaluated based on those very qualities.
Right. Take Lincoln moral leadership on slavery versus the immense cost of the Civil War, or Washington brilliant political skill forging a nation. But then you have his personal life, his ownership of enslaved people. These aren't easy questions.
They really aren't. They're part of the challenge of history.
And that's exactly why we're doing this today. We're applying that same critical thinking, that same lens to Toussaint Louverture, a figure who didn't just change an island, he fundamentally shifted world history.
And crucially for you, listening in from Mr. A's world history class, this deep dive is designed specifically to help you tackle your essay exam for Unit 2, Revolutions that Reshaped the World. The big question we're wrestling with today, the one you'll be writing about, is how should we remember Toussaint Louverture?
And we're going straight to the source. We're going to unpack the exact documents from your Step 3 document analysis, pulling out the key facts, the specific details, the quotes, everything you need for a strong DBQ essay.
We've structured this to help you organize your thoughts using those analytical buckets Mr. A talks about.
Exactly. We'll start with the historical context. What was Saint-Domingue like? Then we'll look closely at the documents through three main lenses. Toussaint as a liberator of slaves, Toussaint as the ruler of Saint-Domingue, and Toussaint as a military commander.
We'll be pulling specifics, quotes, everything directly from those docs, building the case just like you need to for your essay. Ready to dive in.
Let's do it.
Okay, so context first. To really get a handle on Toussaint Louverture and what he achieved, you absolutely have to understand the world he came from. That means understanding the island of Hispaniola.
Right, the place Columbus landed back in 1492, changing everything, really.
Fast forward a couple of centuries to 1697. The western part of that island becomes the French colony of Saint-Domingue.
Which, of course, later becomes Haiti in 1804. It's still Haiti today.
And the economic importance of Saint-Domingue to France back then, it's almost impossible to exaggerate.
It really is. By the 1780s, this place was an absolute economic powerhouse for France. Think about this. 8,000 plantations crammed onto that western third of the island.
8,000.
Producing, get this, 40% of all the sugar consumed in the world and over half of all the coffee.
Wow. Half the world's coffee from this one colony.
Yeah, it was fueling Europe, basically, generating massive, massive wealth for France.
But that wealth, as always in these colonial situations, came at a horrific human price. The social structure was incredibly stark, incredibly brutal.
Absolutely. You had maybe a few thousand rich white planters at the very top controlling everything.
And they relied entirely on the forced labor of enslaved people. An enormous number of enslaved people.
Let's put that number in perspective for you. Saint-Domingue had about 500,000 enslaved people. 500,000.
500,000. Now think about the entire United States around 1800. The total enslaved population there was about 1 million.
So Saint-Domingue, a much, much smaller area, had half the number of enslaved people as the entire U.S.
That concentration is just staggering. It tells you everything about the intensity, the brutality, the sheer scale of the forced labor system there. It was a powder keg.
A pressure cooker, definitely. And into this world, around the 1740s, Toussaint Louverture is born. Born into slavery on the Breda plantation.
His early life, though, even within slavery, gives us some clues about the leader he'd become.
It does. Before the revolution, he had different roles. He started as a herder, then a coachman, which would have given him more mobility, seen more of the island maybe.
And later, an overseer. Now, these roles, even while enslaved, are significant, aren't they? They suggest organizational skills, managing resources, maybe even a bit of trust from those enslaving him, which was rare.
Very rare. And here's something incredibly important, something that really sets him apart.
He learned to read and write.
Exactly. His godfather, Pierre Baptiste, taught him. This was almost unheard of for an enslaved person in Saint-Domingue. Literacy was dangerous to the system.
So having that skill, access to ideas, to written information, that gave him a huge advantage later on.
No question. But his story gets even more complex.
Right, because he actually gained his freedom before the big revolution kicked off. Sometime around 1776, the records suggest.
And after being freed, he didn't just, disappear. He rented a small coffee plantation. And this is the really complex part. He acquired about a dozen slaves himself.
That's a tough detail to square with the image of the great liberator, isn't it?
It is. It complicates the narrative, definitely. Maybe it was pragmatism, adapting to the only economic system available. It shows he was part of the system he would later tear down. History is rarely simple.
So you have this incredibly volatile situation, immense wealth built on suffering, and this figure, Toussaint, with this unique background. And then comes 1789.
The French Revolution. And those ideas, liberté, égalité, fraternité, liberty, equality, brotherhood, they spread like wildfire across the Atlantic.
But in Saint-Domingue, those ideals created huge friction. The white planters, they weren't extending liberty and equality to anyone enslaved. Absolutely not.
Their refusal basically lit the fuse. August 1791, a massive, incredibly violent slave rebellion erupts. Plantations burned, hundreds killed. Just an explosion of centuries of pent-up rage.
And Toussaint, where was he in all this initially?
Well, he was already free by then. But Document A, the timeline, shows he joined the revolution right away in 1791. He started out as a doctor for the rebel troops, taking care of the wounded.
A vital role.
Absolutely. But his leadership qualities must have been obvious pretty quickly, because soon after, he was commanding a small group of slave soldiers. He was earning trust, showing strategic thinking right from the start.
So those early steps, first as a healer, then as a commander of a small detachment, that's the groundwork for everything that followed.
Precisely. The groundwork for changing Saint-Domingue and the world forever.
Okay, so we've got the scene set. Saint-Domingue, this incredibly wealthy but brutal colony, ripe for explosion. And we've seen Toussaint's complex path into the heart of that explosion. Now, let's really dig into the first big bucket for your essay. Toussaint Louverture as the liberator of slaves.
Yeah, and this really deserves the most focus, the 30-minute segment in that documentary analogy. Because his commitment to abolition, it's the absolute core of his story, running through these documents like a steel rod.
Let's start with Document A again, that timeline. It lays it out pretty clearly, doesn't it?
It really does. Look at 1794. That's a huge turning point. The revolutionary government back in France, the Jacobins were in charge, then they did something radical. They abolished slavery in France and all its colonies.
So how did Toussaint react? Who'd been fighting against the French up to that point, right? Allied with the Spanish.
Exactly. But as soon as France abolished slavery, boom, he switches sides, he stops fighting the French and joins them, becomes a general in their army.
That single move tells you so much about his priorities.
It tells you everything. His loyalty wasn't to France or Spain, it was to the cause of freedom. Abolition was the goal. Whichever side offered that, that's the side he was on.
And he didn't just secure freedom within Saint-Domingue's borders, he actively worked to expand it.
Right. The timeline shows that in 1801, he marches into Santo Domingo, the Spanish part of the island, and conquers it.
Was that just about grabbing more land?
Not primarily, no. It was about freeing the enslaved people there, too. Extending emancipation across the entire island. It was a principled act of liberation, consistent with his core mission.
So the pattern in Document A is really clear. Fight against the French when they support slavery, like in 93. Fight with them when they abolish it, after 94.
And then tragically fight against them again when Napoleon comes along in 1802 and threatens to bring slavery back. His entire career lines up with that one goal. Freedom for his people. It's remarkable consistency.
To feel the passion behind that consistency, we really need to look at Document B, that letter he wrote to the French Directory in 1797.
Oh, that letter is something else. You have to remember the context. The government in France was getting more conservative. People in Saint-Domingue were genuinely scared slavery might be reinstated.
And Toussaint's response wasn't just, a polite request.
Polite.
Yeah?
Not even close. It's a roar of defiance. Listen to this bit. It's directly from the letter.
Quote,
Could men who have once enjoyed the benefits of liberty look on calmly while it is taken from them?
wow.
He goes on, they bore their chains when they knew no condition of life better than that of slavery. But today, when they have left it, if they had 1,000 lives, they would sacrifice them all rather than be subjected again to slavery. And the kicker. We have known how to confront danger to our liberty, and we will know how to confront death to preserve it.
Confront death to preserve it. That sends chills down your spine. It's not just political rhetoric, is it?
Not at all. It's raw. It's absolute resolve. He's saying, we know what freedom is now. We will die before we go back. It's an ultimatum, plain and simple. He understood the value of liberty deeply, and he was willing to make the ultimate sacrifice for it.
It makes you think about his name, too. Louverture.
Exactly. He wasn't born with that name. He was Toussaint. He chose Louverture, which means the opening.
The opening, like opening the door to freedom.
Precisely. It's symbolic of his whole mission, finding that path, creating that opening for enslaved people. It's a powerful statement of identity and purpose.
And didn't some sources say he felt, like, destined for this role?
Yes, there are accounts suggesting he had this deep, almost spiritual belief that he was meant to be the leader of free Black people. It wasn't just politics for him, it was a calling. That kind of conviction must have been incredibly powerful for his followers.
So he fought for freedom, he declared his undying commitment to it. But he also made it law, didn't he?
Yes, and that brings us to Document C, the Constitution of 1801. This is huge. Toussaint didn't just accept this constitution. He oversaw the commission that created it. He was the driving force.
And Article 3 is the key part here for the liberator aspect.
Absolutely key. Article 3 states, crystal clear, there cannot exist slaves in this territory. Servitude is therein forever abolished. All men are born, live, and die free and French.
Forever abolished? That's not ambiguous. It's embedding freedom into the legal DNA of the place.
Exactly. It's taking it beyond a military victory and making it a fundamental right. And remember the context.
Right. Saint-Domingue was still technically French, and Napoleon was in charge back in France.
And Napoleon's own new constitution was cagey about the colonies. It allowed for special laws, hinting that maybe slavery could creep back in, or at least new forms of unfree labor.
So Toussaint writing forever abolished into his constitution was a direct challenge.
A direct and defiant challenge. He was putting up a legal firewall against any attempt by Napoleon to backtrack on abolition in Saint-Domingue. It was incredibly bold.
So wrapping up this first big section on Toussaint as liberator, the evidence across these documents, the timeline, the letter, the constitution, it all points overwhelmingly in one direction, doesn't it?
Unquestionably. His primary driving force, the thing he was most consistent about, was ending slavery and defending that freedom at all costs. That's the bedrock of his legacy.
Okay, bedrock established. Toussaint the liberator. But achieving freedom is one thing. Building a functioning society after freedom is a whole different beast.
A massive challenge, yeah.
So let's shift to that second bucket. Toussaint Louverture, the ruler of Saint-Domingue. This gets the 20-minute segment, suggesting it's significant, but maybe secondary to his role as liberator.
That seems fair, because once freedom was declared, the questions became, how do you govern? How do you keep the economy from collapsing? How do you maintain order when everything's been turned upside down?
And Toussaint effectively becomes the guy in charge around 1798, right?
Yes.
Commander-in-chief.
De facto ruler, yeah. So he transitions from general to statesman. He's now responsible for everything politics, economy, society, a totally different skill set required.
And we see his vision for ruling and the tough choices he made laid out again in Document C, the Constitution, but also in Document D.
Let's go back to Document C first. We focused on Article 3, the abolition part. But look at Article 28.
Ah, right. This nominates Citizen Toussaint Louverture Chief General and gives him control for the remainder of his glorious life.
Basically, governor for life, with the power to name his own successor. That's immense power concentrated in one person.
Which, in a place emerging from years of brutal warfare, you could argue provides stability, consistent leadership.
Definitely an argument for it. Prevent chaos, keep things on track.
But the flip side is obvious, isn't it? The risk of dictatorship, absolute power. Well, it corrupts, or at least invites tyranny. It's the classic revolutionary tightrope.
And his economic vision is also right there in the Constitution. Article 14. It says the colony is essentially agricultural and cannot suffer the least disruption in the works of its cultivation.
He knew they needed the plantations running. Sugar, coffee, that was the economy. Without it, the new free state couldn't survive, couldn't defend itself.
Exactly. Economic independence was crucial for political independence.
which led to his new labor system. Articles 15 and 16. They try to paint a picture of plantations as these harmonious family units.
Yeah, quiet haven of an active and constant family, the owner as father, the workers now called cultivators, not slaves as members of the family, getting a share of the revenue.
It sounds better than slavery, obviously, but it's still forcing people to work on plantations, isn't it? A centralized, controlled system.
It absolutely was. It was an attempt to keep production going using mandatory, though technically paid, labor. And for many former slaves, it probably felt way too close to the old system they just fought to escape.
Which brings us straight to Document D, the proclamation from November 1801. This really shows the difficulties he faced and how harsh he could be as a ruler.
The context is key here. Many freed people, understandably, saw freedom as, well, freedom from plantation work. They wanted their own land or just not to do that backbreaking labor anymore.
But Toussaint needed the economy running. He saw it as essential for everyone's collective freedom and survival, a clash of visions.
A huge clash. And his response in this proclamation, Document E, calls the measures draconian for a reason. They were incredibly strict.
Like forcing children to work as soon as a child can walk. That's basically child labor written into law.
Yes, and cracking down hard on any dissent, sedition, punished by court-martial.
Yeah.
No room for opposition.
And the controls on movement. Security cards for everyone.
Internal passports, essentially, detailing name, address, age, sex. Managers punished if they didn't report workers who left their assigned plantation. Vagabond cultivators arrested and sent back by force.
It sounds like a police state, almost.
It was certainly highly controlled. It shows a leader desperate to maintain order and productivity, prioritizing the state's survival over individual liberties, you could say. The pressure must have been immense.
How did he justify this? Did he see it as necessary?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Sources say he argued it was to teach the value of true liberty without license, prevent corruption, ensure the general happiness. He even claimed success, saying everyone was employed, no beggars. He genuinely seemed to believe these harsh methods were for the greater good, the only way to build a viable nation.
So this ruler bucket shows a different Toussaint. Still committed to the idea of freedom, maybe, but willing to be authoritarian, pragmatic, even harsh, to maintain order and keep the economy afloat.
Exactly. It reveals the agonizing choices leaders face after a revolution. He was a liberator, yes, but also a ruler who made difficult, sometimes brutal decisions to ensure the survival of what they'd won. It really complicates the picture, doesn't it?
It definitely does.
Yes.
Okay, so we've seen the liberator, the ruler. Now for the third bucket, the 10-minute segment. Toussaint Louverture, the military commander.
Right. His military skill was undeniable. It was fundamental to achieving freedom and then defending it against massive European powers.
Yeah.
Without his military leadership, Haiti likely wouldn't exist.
Document A touched on his early military role, commanding soldiers, running an orderly camp.
And his tactical innovation, training his men in both guerrilla warfare using the terrain, surprise attacks, and the formal European shoulder-to-shoulder style. That adaptability was key. He wasn't just sticking to one playbook. He used whatever worked against different enemies.
But his command wasn't just about fighting outsiders. He faced internal threats, too. And Document E shows a particularly brutal example, the 1801 rebellion.
Yeah, led by his own adopted nephew, Hyacinthe Moise. That tells you something about the tensions simmering beneath the surface.
What was the rebellion about?
It stemmed from resistance to Toussaint's later policies, those draconian measures we just discussed. Moise and others, particularly African-born former slaves, didn't trust Toussaint's closeness to the white planters, and they wanted smaller, individual land plots, not the big plantation system Toussaint insisted on. It was a fundamental disagreement about what freedom should actually look like on the ground.
And Toussaint's reaction was extreme.
Utterly ruthless. The rebellion itself was a mart. Violent whites were massacred. The cry was death to all whites. Toussaint crushed it swiftly and brutally. Document E mentions him ordering mutinous soldiers to blow their own brains out.
Good grief.
And the fate of Moise himself. Toussaint had him arrested and executed. And the truly chilling detail is that Moise was forced to give the command for his own firing squad.
That's terrifying. What does that tell us about Toussaint as a commander?
It shows an absolute, unwavering insistence on discipline and control, a willingness to use extreme, even horrific, violence even against family to crush any challenge to his authority. It highlights his toughness, yes, but also a dark, pragmatic ruthlessness necessary, perhaps, for holding power in such a volatile situation.
It reminds me of that quote you mentioned earlier about his ruthlessness and benevolence being hard to reconcile in one person.
Exactly. Madison Smart Bell captured that contradiction perfectly. Toussaint could be benevolent, but he could also be terrifyingly effective at eliminating threats.
So a harsh internal commander when needed. But what about against external enemies? Against the European powers? Document F, the Battle of Samana, speaks to that, right?
Absolutely. This is 1802. Napoleon is furious with Toussaint acting so independently, sending this massive French army, 21,000 soldiers initially, part of a larger force to crush the revolution and bring back slavery.
A huge threat. And the source here is William Walls Brown, an escaped slave himself.
Yes, an abolitionist writer. So his perspective is definitely going to frame Toussaint heroically. He talks about Toussaint's superior knowledge, his humanity, generosity, courage, how he had the complete confidence of his troops. He paints a picture of an inspiring leader.
And Toussaint's speech at Samana, as Brown reports it.
It's incredibly powerful. As the French ships arrive, he rallies his troops. Here come the enslavers of our race. All France is coming. But not France, can extinguish the soul of Africa. That soul can overthrow the pyramids and the Alps themselves sooner than again be crushed down into slavery.
Wow. That's not just tactics, that's tapping into deep historical pride and the absolute will to resist.
Totally. And his military strategy was brilliant. Instead of meeting the French head-on, where they were stronger.
He used the scorched earth tactic.
Exactly. He, Dessalines, Christophe, his top generals, they abandoned towns, burned them to the ground, and retreated into the mountains. Those citadels of freedom, Brown calls them.
Forcing the French into unfamiliar territory.
Where Toussaint's forces were masters of guerrilla warfare, ambushes, disease. It wore the French down relentlessly. It was devastatingly effective.
And the result, the numbers are shocking.
They really are. Out of that massive French force, historians estimate around 31,000 total. Eventually sent only about 7,000 or 8,000 survived the fighting and disease.
That's incredible, a testament to Toussaint's military leadership.
Absolutely. Even though he himself was captured later that year, betrayed, and died in a French prison. His military genius laid the foundation. He defeated the major European powers, the Spanish, the British, and ultimately Napoleon's forces. That paved the way for Haiti's Declaration of Independence in 1804, the first free Black republic. His military contribution was monumental.
Okay, so we've explored the liberator, the ruler, and the military commander. 3 distinct buckets, but clearly overlapping and interconnected. Now let's bring it all together for the essay. How do you synthesize this complexity?
That's the key skill, right? Using those buckets not just to sort info, but to build your argument. And recognizing, as we saw with document C, that one piece of evidence can fit in multiple buckets.
The Constitution showed him as liberator and ruler.
Exactly. That reflects reality. His actions often served multiple purposes or revealed different sides of him. It's not about forcing everything into neat boxes, but seeing the connections.
And that 30-20-10 weighting idea from the assignment is useful here, isn't it, for structuring your argument?
It's a great mental model. It suggests prioritizing his role as liberator, the 30-minute focus. That's backed by his consistent fight against slavery, Docs AB, and making abolition law, Doc C. That seems to be his most defining contribution.
Then ruler gets the next level of focus. 20 minutes. Establishing order, trying to build an economy, even if it meant being authoritarian, Doc C, D. The necessary, if sometimes ugly, work of state building.
And finally, military commander, 10 minutes. Crucial for winning and defending freedom, showing his strategic brilliance and toughness, Docs AEF. But maybe a supporting role to the why he was fighting liberation.
And this connects to that chicken foot idea for your thesis statement.
Precisely. Your main argument how Toussaint should be remembered is the leg. The toes are the supporting points. His roles as liberator, ruler, and commander, each backed by evidence from the documents.
So this deep dive helps you develop those baby theses for each paragraph. You use the facts, the quotes, the inferences from the documents.
And then you add your analysis. Why does this evidence matter? How does it support your point about how he should be remembered? That's the critical thinking part.
And it means embracing the complexity, right? Not shying away from the contradictions.
Absolutely. Acknowledging he was a liberator and sometimes authoritarian, a military genius and sometimes ruthless, that makes for a much stronger, more accurate, more insightful historical argument. Don't simplify him. Wrestle with the complexity. That's what good history writing is all about.
So wrapping this all up, how should we remember Toussaint Louverture? We've gone deep into the sources, looked at him from multiple angles. It's clear he wasn't simple.
Far from it. A profoundly complex figure, full of contradictions, shaped by an extraordinary time.
He was undeniably the liberator, Risking everything, fighting relentlessly, making freedom law, that's paramount.
But he was also the ruler. Pragmatic, focused on survival, willing to impose harsh order to build a state out of chaos, sometimes sacrificing individual liberty for collective stability.
And the military commander, brilliant strategist, adaptable, inspiring, who defeated empires but could also be incredibly ruthless to maintain control.
His legacy forces us to think about the immense pressures leaders face, especially those trying to create something entirely new, like a free nation born from slavery. The choices are rarely easy.
And his story, all its triumphs and its difficult realities, it really pushes us to think about what freedom even means, doesn't it?
It does. What sacrifices are acceptable to achieve it? How do you balance liberty with the need for order, especially right after a revolution? These aren't just historical questions.
They resonate today. So a final thought for you as you continue your own thinking. How does Toussaint Louverture's journey, with all its light and shadow, challenge our own assumptions about freedom, leadership, and the cost of building a new world?
That's the question to keep pondering, keep questioning, keep analyzing. That's the heart of history.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.